Hello, I'm back on Seine again. I went to Fécamp this morning. The winds weren't too bad, it was about 12 to 13 knots, but the sea was very agitated. There was no way I was going to put to sea in those conditions. So I came to Henouville, which is near Duclair on the Seine. This is the tidal part of the Seine. So there's a bit of wind. I'm going along quite nicely. It's nearly high tide, and that's the sailing club of Henouville, and I've just launched there, and here we are. It's a very different kind of river than the river I was sailing on in the non-tidal part. But this is rather nice. Here's the new rudder, which is working just beautifully. I thought it was going to be a little bit too shallow, but it's doing very nicely. I wouldn't use it on the sea. I need a much deeper rudder, which I have with my folding rudder. But this is, I think this is doing rather nicely. So I'm going down towards the south. I'm going towards a village called La Bouille. And if it's a bit difficult getting back because of the tide, well, I can just use the engine and go near the edge. So I'll be back if there's anything particularly interesting. Hello again. As you can hear, I've got the sewing machine on. Because I've got an unfavourable wind and the tide has just turned, so I can't tack back and forth anymore. I'm coming up to a place called La Bouille. It's still a little bit away. It's a lovely little village along by the side of the Thames. Oh, the Seine. I'm not in England. I'm in France, and so I'll be going along through La Bouille before turning back with the tailwind and the tide, which will get me back nicely. So I'll just have to put up with the sewing machine for a little while. At one time, all the banks of the Seine were like this under the tree, and to remind you that this is the tidal part of the Seine. So when the tide turned at low tide and the tide started coming in, there was a bore which used to be called the masquerade, and at one time it was very dangerous. So some engineers came in. I don't know who they were, but they built stone and concrete banks, and for some reason, just after that red buoy, there is an engineered bank, and those banks alleviated the power of the masquerade, the bore, and so it's now no longer a danger. Well, now we're past high tide, and the tide is just beginning to go out. I'm going towards Rouen, but I'm not going to go to Rouen. I'm going to go to La Bouille. Actually, that buoy tells us that we are at La Bouille, and so we'll see some buildings. It's a rather nice little town with some very, very nice houses. So I'll show you them when we get there. I didn't make it all the way to La Bouille because there's quite a current. It's a fairly high coefficient, and the current's getting a lot stronger. So I turned around. I'm on my way back because otherwise I might have trouble recovering the boat on the ramp. So this is a continuation, more or less, of La Bouille. And you can see the kind of houses that some of the more wealthy people can afford. which is a rather nice imitation Norman house. And a little bit further down there's a little bit more of a mansion. The others are much more ordinary houses, although I'm sure they're very nice, and the owners are very proud of them, as they rightfully should be. Some old cliffs. I'm now looking towards La Bouille, but I've given that up. So I've now got a tailwind and I've got the current with me, so I'm going fairly fast. So I'll leave off there. I'll keep you online whilst we go past this rather nice mansion. I'll see if I can get a bit closer to it. I'll change sides. I don't think we've got any ships coming. This is the part of the Seine where the big ships come in from Le Havre and go up to Rouen, and they displace an awful lot of water, several thousands of tons. So one has to be careful if there's one of those sticking around. I better not go in too near to the other bank, because otherwise there's no wind. So there's the end of the house just behind my stay. There's another rather nice house behind the tree. Kind of place that would be owned by a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, or I think politicians, so that would be a very poor house for a politician. So coming up to that rather nice mansion, steep roof, very typically Norman. Oh yes, going quite fast, just with the current, because there's very little wind. You can see that the sails are flapping, and but probably will be a little bit more wind. I can see some more wind on the water as we go down. So I want to go at a decent speed, because I don't want to have trouble at the slipway. Here's some more. The front of that nice house is coming up into view. I think it's probably 19th century. It's a very classical French style. Some big trees in front of it, perhaps planted by the first owner, and by the person who had it built. Strikes me as something from the very early 19th century. There's another nice little what would be in another context a farmhouse. Just going through a bit of wind here. Yes, it's going quite nicely. It's not going to last very long, but it's a tailwind. There's something up in those trees there. It looks like a chapel. That's quite amazing, with a tree going through the foundations, and then there seems to be 2 windows on the side and a little bell coat. I doubt if it's ever used nowadays. It's probably nobody cares about it. And then this little house here I would have the impression that the chapel is probably part of the property of that house there. Well, Tend to be a bit of a curtain twitch around here. Those are my curtains. I twitch those. Well, we're just about out of the lockdown now. There are very, very few restrictions. Really, nowadays it's only questions of international travel. And of course, when we're going to shops, we wear masks and we keep the proper distances, and we wash our hands with the usual alcohol gel. The virus is still circulating in France, and I'm not taking any risks. So I do the proper things to keep safe. There's no reflection on anyone else, but the more we do protect ourselves, the quicker it will disappear. And so here's the front of this lovely house coming into view. As I go past, there's half of it still hidden by the trees. There's a dovecote next to the house. Those are obviously stables and mews. Lovely classical house, and there we are. Steep roof. Servants' quarters upstairs, behind the gables, and then the rest of the house for whoever it belongs to. It's beautiful, isn't it? I'll do a blow up. There we are. I think that's quite out of focus, but it just gives an idea. I'll go back to size. Right, well, I'll sign off here, and we better get on before I run out of water. This looks interesting, as the house looks to be from something like the 1920s or 30s, with a house of a different style just next to it. They seem to be joined together, and then what appears to be an old workshop or something. Curtains in the windows, so it looks like all that's lived in. It's quite amazing. Perhaps they have a gîte or something like that. And then behind there's some other very utilitarian buildings. It's quite strange. Oh, well, these are some of the things you see. Then a few other little buildings going up the road, and you can just about see the old cliffs through the trees. I would imagine all that was carved out by a glacier. You know, something like the time of the dinosaurs, something like that. And then the river remained from whatever it was. Must have been something quite dramatic. Oh, I seem to be getting a little bit of wind, and so I'll concentrate on sailing. Here's another one of those gorgeous houses. Looks like it reminds me very much of a Russian dacha, the kind of places people in Russia lived in when they were very privileged. Well, this one is in France. It's all shut up. All the blinds, window blinds are closed, and I was ready for that one. Well, I've got a better view of the house now with the sail out of the way. It's quite amazing. Some outbuildings there behind the trees. Yes, it is rather lovely. This is one of the most awkward slipways I have ever found to have to get to. First of all, the trailer has to be backed around, and then has to be backed down very sharply, and then onto the slipway. It's not exactly low tide, but it's lower than it was. But now the boat's out of the water, so I got it out here, and there she is. Oh gosh, yes, it's just a bit askew because there was a lot of wind. It was quite difficult to get onto the trailer. Anyway, that's where we are, and now unrigging and home.